Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 156 of Retro Power Uncut. And we're starting the fabrication workshop, and I am wearing a rather fetching Roundstone Coffee t-shirt, as you can see. Well, I'm the last person to be modelling clothes, I can assure you, so I'll leave that right there. But I'm sure Cal will fill in the story more on these when we move on through to the assembly shop. I'm going to start with Mark II Jag. And Mark II Jag two-door coupe, should I say, because it's not just a Mark II Jag. And lead work continues, as you can see, a pace now, because we have a Tom and a Stu working on it. So there's lots going on there. Stu's getting gradually through the work this side. Tom had got the lead all put in on this side, and Stu's doing the fine-tuning work around the bottom of the C-pillar as we speak, and Tom's doing the roughing out by the sounds of things on the offside there, doing the taking some of the surface layer of lead off. And I think I mentioned before about not going into too much detail on the lead, and then I've seen lots of comments about people saying, oh no, do go into detail on lead. At some point we will do a bit of a leading focus, but the basic principle of it is as per soldering. Basically you tin the surface of the steel, you to do that you use a lead paint, which is basically lead dust suspended in zinc chloride. You paint that onto the panel, you heat it with a blowtorch, and you rub it with wire wool and use that to tin that will gradually create a tinning, a wet layer of solder. Tom, just back off a little bit a minute, it's a bit loud. Sorry, it's just a wee bit, I thought I'd be all right shouting over, but it's just a bit energetic on the filing front. So, yeah, you basically use the wire wool to abrade the surface, basically ensure that the surface is wetted with lead. And once the surface is completely wetted with lead, or tinned as we would say, then from that point you can then make further lead stick to that. Now the particular lead alloy that we use, and I don't know the exact composition of it, but it has quite a wide plastic point. So in its temperature range, some lead alloys go immediately from sort of a water consistency straight to solid and don't have any in between. This particular alloy will, and I don't exactly know what it is, but it has an area where it's pliable and able to be shaped. It's very, very soft and able to be shaped without being so fluid that it just runs off the panel. So the lead's applied and roughly shaped, and we use basically various shaped bits of wood for that. I think there are all sorts of terminology to describe them, but we use basically bits of wood, which are actually bits of kerrowing that we have lying around, which is similar to mahogany, that type of timber, very hard wood. We sand it to the shape we want for doing shaping the lead to the shape we want, and people use tallow to stop it sticking. To be honest, we just use a bit of old oil, well, a bit of new, but oil, gear oil, on a cloth, and then we just wipe the wood on that to stop the solder sticking to the wood, and then use that to shape the lead. It's not particularly technical. Once the lead's been very roughly shaped with the wood, then it needs to be filed to shape, and that's what Stu's doing here now. He's just filing the surface of the lead to get the final shape to it, and that's just a methodical process of filing it to shape. Very, very, very much like shaping body filler, etc. But it's obviously much more durable. It doesn't sink like body filler does, and it just makes a slightly more professional job on the areas where the shape's really critical. For example, Stu's working on at the moment the fuel filler recess, and there's an edge around that, and if any fill was needed, we wouldn't want to use body filler around an edge there. I mean, I'm only talking sort of small quantities here, you know, sort of maybe 1.5 millimeters at most around there, but we wouldn't want to use body filler even to that extent in that area, because if it's ever caught with the fuel filler nozzle, it's one thing chipping a little bit of paint off, but if you chip a chunk of body filler out as well, it's a right mess. So it's on any edges, we would really be very reluctant to use any filler on edges. So we tend to try and use lead. Plus we're also using lead where the factory originally used lead, and these cars were very, very liberally leaded originally. You know, there's huge thicknesses of lead applied to various areas on them, that bit being one of them. I think I saw that in the comments as well last week or the week before about the scuttle to wing area on the Mark II being leaded originally and heavily leaded originally, and yes it is, it's extremely heavily leaded there, as this one is again now. But yeah, Stu's working on the rear sort of 3/4, bottom of the C-pillar, fuel filler, which is sort of on the haunch of the car there, and also getting the line down the quarter panel fine-tuned, ready for where the chrome trim's going to go along there. Again, that's getting that line exactly right because of the various panels that have been grafted in. There's some slight deviations in that body line, so it's just adjusting that line using the lead to get that exactly right. So that's what's going on there at the moment. A lot of lead around the place, catching all the filings on the floor, on the paper, or the bulk of them. Obviously we're vacuuming up, using our big shop vac to get rid of all the sort of leftovers. It doesn't get trodden all around the workshop, and generally lead contaminate everything. And then the stuff that goes onto the floor, we then tend to remelt that into ingots to use for any sort of heavy fill areas that we might need to do. All the impurities come out when it's remelted, and we can then reuse it. It tends to lose that sort of plastic point that I was talking about earlier once it's been remelted, so it's not very good for fine-tuning lead work, but it can be used where you've got a heavy fill to do. So we tend to we've got a little mould that we can recast bars of it into. Should we see the point? Should we see the reason to do that, which there will be on this car, because there's a huge amount of lead filings going to be generated by the process. So yeah, that's where we're at on all that. Moving on from that, we'll swing by the Redux E30 M3 project, which Scott's been progressing very well with this week. He's got pretty much all the panelling up done. I think he'd done the bulk of that last week. He's just finished off a couple of bits. He's been lining up the boot lid, getting the alignment finished on that, and then moved on to the rear bumper. And we've made a slight revision to the way the rear bumper's being mounted, just to give us a slightly easier adjustment and make the fitment very slightly neater. So he's come up with a little assembly to do that, and then he's made this little made a little jig here so that we can he can repeat that assembly on the future builds. Just makes it a little bit easier to weld I'm not going to go into all the detail of the design of it now, but there's basically a little assembly, a little outrigger assembly that's going to carry these bumper mounting points and fit through the quarter panel, and it's made in two pieces that need welding together, and those are aligned by this little jig, and the little cutouts in it enable him to get the TIG welding tacks put on, enables it to be tacked up to start with, and then it can be taken out of there and fully welded after it's been tacked. So that's what that was about, and that's what's going on there. There's also been Rich has also been knocking up some more clamps for this project, because we've realised there are further carbon panels on this car to what was on the previous one, we need more clamps. So we've been making up some more of these, which are quite nifty little clamps that we make up. They're very simple, just flat bar and channel section, but it enables us to clamp a varying thickness of panel on that clamp using pretty cost-effective parts with quite a high clamp force. Very easy to, very easy and simple to make, and there's not really anything that we've already got or that I know off the shelf that would do quite the same job. So we've made up a few more of those. Moving on from that to the V12 E-Type, Sam's been working on this. And as we can see, he's just cut a hole in the top of the transmission tunnel. Actually, that wasn't there when I last looked at that this morning. The current operation is the mounting of the gear shifter assembly. Viewers will probably remember that we're using a GM 4L80E transmission in this, which was actually from a Jaguar, hence why it's fitted to the Jaguar engine. The GM 4L80E was fitted to the Jaguar X300 XJ. I think they were fitted to the X308 as well, but actually no, I don't think they were. They were on X300 V12 and X300 XJR6 cars. Both had the 4L80E GM transmission, but with a different casing casting made specifically for the Jaguar. That's what we're using in this. That's also what we're using in the Churchill project. And we're using a low car shifter in this. We found them to be pretty good in our experience so far. Very nicely made. We're using a low car shifter in this, so he's starting to make the platform to mount that low car shifter, which we've got to get absolutely as low and as close to the transmission as we possibly can, without it obviously touching the transmission, but just to try and keep all the height down, because obviously an E-Type's a slim vehicle. There's not an awful lot of space in it. So that's what's going on there. There's an initial hole cut out, and then there'll be a sort of a box dropped into that hole and welded in. with the side mounts, we take off the original low-car brackets, which are like a 90-degree bracket on each corner, take those off, and then we'll mount it off directly from a pair of sandwich plates off the sides of the low-car shifter, and they'll be mounted into that recess there, which we've worked out the position on. Then the other thing that's been going on this week is finishing off the seat mounting for the driver's seat, and we're then pausing at that point. We're not going to make the passenger seat mounts yet, because we want to get the car's owner to come up and recheck the driving position for a final time with the seat in the position it's in now, before we continue and do the same this side, just in case there's any fine tuning needed. So that's where he's at on that, and that's why there's no seat mountings in this side. He's actually made Sam's actually made the cross member for the front, made the brackets for the back. He's not pocketed the transmission tunnel yet, just in case there's a change in terms of the dimensions and where that's got to fit. The other thing he's done this week is make the transmission cross member. I think he'd started that at the tail end of last week. He's finished that transmission cross member, made the mounting plates that go onto the transmission tunnel, and got all that bolted in place, and that's all fitted, and then brazed in these counter plates with the welded on threaded bosses in. Welded those, TIG brazed those onto the floor, and as I say, the seat box will then cover the bulk of that part once that's fitted, and then it means that the transmission mountings are effectively hanging on the inner end of the seat box, supported by the transmission tunnel and the end of the seat box. It's a pretty strong structure, really. It's quite nicely laid out. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at on E-Type, and so the metalwork progress on this is going to be moving on to the shifter, and then other interior metalwork, and our rear roll. It's not going to be a roll bar as such. It will bring an element of safety, but it's not going to be a sort of full crash rated roll bar. But we're adding it's basically going to be a tonneau support bar that could also act as a bit of an additional roll safety bar that we're going to be adding to the back, and we've got to put the bracketry in for that. And that's going to be one of the next sort of design stages involved before we can actually do the metal work on that. We've got to get the exact positioning worked out for that, so that we can put the structure in to carry it in the back. So there'll be a folding bar on the back, but without the CAD in front of me to explain all this at the moment, we'll delve further into that at a future time. Moving on from that, we'll go around past the Allegro, the brace of Allegros. We'll pass the first one, which hasn't changed too dramatically, and then move on to the second one. I'm going to stand here, actually. It's a good place. Bobby's got his swing out, the B18C6 swing, which is suspended over there. He's pulled that out, so he's got better access into the front of this. This cardboard here tells the story of what's going on this. You'll recall from many weeks ago, I was waving a condenser, an air conditioning condenser around, talking about welding a different union into the bottom of it to get some clearance on the AC compressor on this car. That all worked. That was fine. We've got good clearance. Everything's worked well there. But we're still extremely tight in terms of space at the front. I've spec'd up some SPAL fans that will fit in the space available and have the requisite airflow. And then Bobby's made some cardboard replicas from the SPAL drawings for those fans, so that we can work out the space required and see if everything fits, which it does just. It's extremely tight. Then Bobby's carried on with the tube fabrication underneath the front to support the valance and to support the radiator and the aircon condenser. And then we had a bit of a meeting earlier in the week and a heads together with myself, Bobby and Cal, just trying to work out how to do the mounts. And we've come up with a plan for a way to, Bobby had already done the lower mounts. We've come up with a plan of a way to mount the top of the radiator in a very neat fashion, and also mount the top of the AC condenser, and also a way of clipping that into the frame of the front of the car without having to weld any more brackets onto the condenser than it's a Porsche 911 condenser, and in the Porsche it actually clipped into a plastic frame, We're going to do similar, only it won't be a plastic frame, it'll be a metal frame, but it'll have a neoprene sponge lining where that condenser clips in, and then one bolt to hold it in there, and then a couple of folded sections on a frame to retain it all in place. So a lot of waffle. It'll all make sense when it's all fabricated, basically. You'll be able to see it, but that's what the current chunk of work is, basically making all that, making the cooler pack basically fit in the front of the car in a very, very small amount of space. And then the other bit of work that Bobby's been doing is panelling up the whole front end of the car and making sure all the panels fit, so that he knows that this is in the right place. So he's had the wings, bonnet, doors, everything on, everything aligned, and he's also tried panelling it up with the panels from the first car, on the grounds that the scan work for the carbon panels has all been done from the first car. So realistically, everything on this car needs to match the panels from the first car. So he's tried panelling it up with those panels, and there are no significant problems there. There are a couple of slight differences, and actually there's a couple of slight improvements in using the panels from the first car versus the second car. So that is what it is. We don't really know why, other than that this car, the brown one, is an earlier car, the red one is a later car. I don't really know. We know there are pressings differences between the two, but none of them affect anything that we're doing, and none of them are really very relevant. And the panels do fit, and actually, as I say, the front wings from the later car actually fit the earlier car better than the wings from the earlier car. Strangely, don't ask why, I don't know. They just do, because British Leyland. Yeah, so that's where we're at with the Allegro project. It's coming along really well. We're really pleased with that. Really looking forward to getting into sort of the further sort of mechanical stages with these. I'm really just very excited about having Honda running gear all rebuilt and up and running and all in place. And then, last but not least, behind the little whiteboard over here, Scott's doing a bit of. I won't put him on camera, like won't put the pressure on him right now, but you'll be able to hear in the background. Scott's doing some TIG work, which earlier in the week I've been doing the first part of the fabrication of the dry Sunp Tanks for the MK1 Escorts, for the two MK1 Escort projects, which are being made in a similar way to the way. They're not the same, they're actually quite different in terms of dimensions, but very similar in where they go in the car, and very similar in the principle of the design to the tank that I did on Gordon Murray's car, where we do a billet bottom for the tank, and then a billet top piece, and then a billet breather piece that goes on. It's just easier and nicer and much cleaner looking to make those pieces from machined aluminium, and then do the big bit that holds all the oil in between the detail parts in fabricated aluminium. It's just using the right processes for the right parts of the job. And yes, it's a fairly expensive tank at the end of it, but I don't think you could make it purely fabricated as neatly and still have it fit as neatly into the part of the car it needs to fit into. You can't just use a round tank because it won't really fit, and if you just fabricate a rectangular box, it won't have the right functions in terms of what it actually needs to do. So doing it from billet makes a lot of sense. I'll grab one of the bits just to explain. I think you'll have seen these before on it, but that's the bottom of the tank, which is machined from aluminium. It means that with the threads can be cut directly into it. We can put the weld detail, we can put the weld prep onto the machine part, the sensor bosses, the drain plug, everything's in. The mounting screws, the mountings for the base of it are already machined in. Everything's made, all of the mounting points, there's no welds or anything involved in that. The only weld will then be welding the actual upright part of the tank fabrication onto this. And to that end, I will grab, there's an example of one of the fabricated tank bodies. That's an example. I'm probably going to put this on the wrong way around, sort of, because I'm just doing it on camera now, but that basically sits on there. Once that's closed off and all pulled together, that actually sits on there. It's not doing it at the moment because I've probably got it the wrong way around and the radiuses are not the same on all the corners. But basically that sits like that on there and is then welded on there. And then, as I say, there's a baffle and there's an extended section and there's another billet section on top, all designed to do various jobs. But it seems to be a way of using the right materials and the right processes for the right parts of the job, doing it that way. So yeah, dry Sunp Tank progress. So Scott's doing some of the welding for me, because I think I've mentioned before, it's quite nice being at a stage where not so many years ago I'd have done all the welding, and it's quite nice. I kind of miss doing it, but what's quite nice is being able to hand over to people that can actually probably do the job better than I can. Well, can do the job better than I can. And I quite like that. It feels a bit alien at first, but actually it's really nice to be able to just go, yeah, you know, you can do the job better than I can, so you do it. And it's quite comforting in a way to be able to do that. So yeah, that's where we're at on that. Dry Sunp Tank progress. And then body shop. Basically, lots of loose ends. It's probably not worth walking through it. There's lots of loose ends. There was some damage done to the Stratos, actually during its testing by its customer or its customer's friend. There was some damage done to the Stratos at that point, and we're repairing that. There was a couple of scratches on another part of the Stratos that we're also repairing. And there are, I'm trying to think what other things we're doing now, and I'm just at a loss now. There's some background work going on for the second Escort, and that we mentioned pinstriping. The final colour choices for the pinstriping are being made. The sample panel has been done and is now winging its way to the USA to be checked over by the customer to confirm the final colour for the pinstripe before it's actually done. So the Escort's basically sitting awaiting that pinstriping operation at the moment. The Chevette is awaiting its final paint. And yeah, there's just a load of tying up of loose ends going on. Basically, I know that at some point, very imminently, there's some paint protection film work got to be done. But I'll let Cal explain more on all that because that's really more assembly shop related things. I think that pretty much wraps up where we're at in here. I was thinking about trying to do some questions and answers, and then it's totally gone from my mind, and I can't remember what questions had been asked that I was intending to answer. So we'll come back to those another time, and in the meantime, if anybody wants to ask me anything that they might think I can't answer, then, then ask away, and I'll see what I can do. So until then, yeah, I'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, Nat. I've got me Roundstone coffee. Everybody's scattering out of the way. Don't film me. We'll catch up on the latest. In fact, we've had a good old move round in here, which is always interesting. It's funny, like when you see a car in one position for a long while and then it suddenly moves somewhere else. You see it in a different light and it looks awesome. Like seeing the Escort moved over looked different. And then seeing the Camaro, with it having been on the lift for so long, suddenly seeing it on its wheels, it looks mega. Right, so I shall start with Project 1 Escort. Oh, what a good view of the rear end. Haven't really seen it from this position, I don't think, before. So rather than getting carried away with that, I better remember what we've been doing on it. So Luke has been working on more of the CAD work for it. So I think last week we showed that he was just going on some centre console design stuff. We've done some prototype 3D printed pieces of the components that go into that. And then having offered it up in the car, I've wanted to make a couple of changes. I wasn't very happy with the size of the phone holder because by the time you've actually got a USB plug on the bottom of the phone, if you want to charge it, it kind of wouldn't fit very nicely in there. So we've done a bit of a change to that console just to extend it forward so we could put a longer phone holder into it and simplify the design slightly. So definitely proving the worth of doing the prototype jobs. And then he's moved on to the dash. So I think we previously showed Tom making the aluminium dash pad, if you like, which will be, it'll have 3mm foam on it and then be wrapped in Alcantara. Now that's there, we've just sort of taped it in position so we could do a 3D scan of the dash with the steering column in and with that dash pad in place. So we could do the instrument binnacle design, which is now done. It's actually a reasonably simple piece. It's just getting the angles right so that the instrument face nicely towards the driver. They're going to be shaded nicely by the sun, from the sun, and sort of tying it with some element elsewhere in the car. So Luke's kind of done a bezel around the front of it that slightly mimics the profile of the window winder design that we've done. And then it's just going to have retro power kind of machined in like an embossed detail at the bottom of it. That literally holds the two instruments, the tacho and speedo, which are speed hut instruments, and I think 5 warning lights. They'll all be powered, they're all going to be powered actually via a CAN controller from our mate Dan at Peterson EV. So he's been doing some instrument builds for us. We probably showed one a while ago actually when he did the instruments for the blue E-Type that's lurking under the cover over there. It was basically a CAN bus version of the original Smiths type instruments. And on this we're using analog instruments, so they are just speed hook gauges, the sort of 4 auxiliary gauges in the centre and then the tacho and the speedo. But then Dan's doing this, his kind of CAN to analog converter, so it'll receive the CAN information from the MoTeC ECU and then adapt the signal and control the instruments, rather than us having to duplicate sensors, like have one for the ECU, one for the instruments, which tidies that up a bit. It's also going to control the warning lights, which is good, because that means we can use the MoTeC PDM that's controlling all the electronics on the car, rather than having to splice the wires out on the output for things like the oil pressure warning lights, indicator telltales or whatever. The CAN box will basically read the CAN communication stream from the PDM as well and operate those various telltale lights. Again, kind of cutting down on duplicated stuff and wiring that doesn't need to be there. So yeah, that's looking really good. I think he's just set a, God, I can't get my words out today. He's just set a 3D print going of that binnacle, so we can try that in the dash. I'm reasonably confident that's going to be spot on. Obviously now I've said that, it won't be. So that's good to go. Bruce has just been lasering, they're not here now actually, but he's been lasering the door cards. And actually that's reminded me that Luke's also been working on some of the other interior trim panels. So he previously scanned a large proportion of the interior and did CAD drawings of the rear quarter trims, the door trims, which have all been laser cut from ABS at the minute by Bruce. He's now also done the bulkhead panel and the parcel shelf panel, which again are going to be laser cut from 3mm ABS, and they'll be wrapped in leather or Alcantara or whatever, according to where they are. I think the shelf will be Alcantara and the bulkhead leather. So that's all moving forward. I'm just trying to think whether there was something else on this. Feel like there was. Oh, actually something we've been looking at is wipers. So it's kind of come to a bit of a head because of looking at the wipers on this. So I'm moving briefly to the Morris. James was looking at the windscreen wipers because I wasn't very happy with them, and now we basically bought the appropriate set of Tex wipers that are supplied for this era of Morris. It's got the clap hands wipers, as they call them, where they kind of go out and to the middle rather than both to one side. But I wasn't very happy essentially with how the blade attached to the arm. The arm's just got a hook on the end, which kind of jams into a detail on the blade, but not very convincingly, and it just kind of wobbles around and looks like it'll fly off at the slightest provocation. So we were looking at the other type of Tex wiper arm that's actually got, I think they call it a bayonet fitting, but it's kind of the wiper arm actually clicks into a socket quite positively. And we were thinking it makes much more sense to use those because they do the same length wiper blades with that system, and they can do the wiper arms. Now I believe possibly on the later Morrises they do actually offer that style, but not on the clap hands. And I was thinking, well, the only difference is that one's cranked one way and the other's cranked the other way. And I know that Tex offer right and left hand drive arms for a lot of cars, so it kind of made sense that there just needed to be an arm that was the right length, one cranked to the right, one cranked to the left, 10-degree crank on them, and the appropriate size blade. So we spoke to Tex, who are actually very cooperative, very helpful, and I think in the space of a day or two knocked us up exactly what we wanted. So we now have the bayonet type fitting wiper arms to go on there. So that's sort of resolve that one. However, on the subject of wipers, I don't know if any of the parts are laid out over here. We were thinking about the Mark 1 Escort setup, and the way that the wipers go onto the sort of spindles on the sort of Lucas type setups is not, it works, but on a performance car it's not that convincing. Now on the Morris we've actually drilled and grub screwed them to make sure they can't rotate on the spindles or come off. But we were thinking on the Escorts, it's a bigger screen, it would be nice to have some modern wiper arms and blades on there, and they're actually very similar to the Mark II setup. In fact, the spindles are the same separation distance. I think it's even possible to put a Mark II setup in there, but the bracketry on the shell needs to be different. And where we've got our washer jet feed coming through and our engine ECU mounted, it would mean it would be very tight to get a Mark II setup in there. So we started thinking, actually it'd be nice to just make the Mark I assembly work with a different type of spindle that works with a more modern wiper arm. So that's what we're doing. We're basically machining up some spindles that will work with the Mark 1 assembly, but allow the fitment of a more modern wiper that actually has a nut that holds it onto a spline on the arm. And that way we can use some more modern, stiffly sprung wiper arms with decent blades that aren't going to blow up at 100 and whatever mile an hour, if these cars get used on the track, of course. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. So moving kind of forward on various little fronts on the Escort projects. Going back to the Morris, I think last week I'd basically signed it off mechanically. We're moving forward to having it detailed, but there was, despite my best efforts, you probably noticed it was encased in masking tape on the back, but despite my best efforts, it picked up a couple of stone chips on it during testing. So one on the front wing and then a couple on the rear wings. So we've had them off. Gaz has now repainted all of those. The rear wings I'm leaving off because we're going to do a sprayed PPF on those to avoid any future chips. And then the front wing has gone back on now, and I think over the course of tomorrow we'll be just buttoning up any last bits on this so that on Monday it can go over to Dale at Detail by Dale. He'll spruce it all up inside and out, do the final machine polishing on it, ceramic coat it all, basically make it look amazing, and then once it's back here we'll get the PPF'd rear wings bolted on, and I think that will be ready to go. So that's where we're at on that. Just briefly touching back on Escort stuff, Anthony's been doing some of the final preparations to get Project Kuma, the sister car to Project 1, rolling. So as soon as we finish with the paintwork in there, we can get it rolling immediately. Now we've just actually received back the wheels from having the tyres fitted, so that's ticked another job off. The struts, we were waiting to come back from Nitron with their re-lengthed reservoir hoses. So that's now been done, they came back, and then that allowed Anthony to crack on with the front strut build up, so getting the hubs assembled, the discs on, essentially getting the complete strut assemblies ready to go on the car, and the rear subframe is already done. So we are pretty much at the point now that as soon as that car comes in here, we can get the struts on, get the rear subframe in, front subframe, get the wheels and tyres on, and that should be rolling pretty much within a day of it being in here, I'd say. Land Cruiser, obviously last week, big cheers as we discovered the source of the dreaded squeak on it. Moving on from that, I'm struggling to think what we have been on with this. Oh, I remember. We're obviously waiting for the revised Viton lined hose for the fuel fill setup. But we decided as a sort of belt and braces, we're also going to put a vent in the bottom of the sort of fuel tank enclosure to the underside of the car. There was a small vent hole in there, but we've decided to put a bigger hole in there and then make a little fabricated shield over it, so that sort of the air rushing under the car creates a sort of negative pressure to pull any fumes out of that tank. And also stops any rain and road sprayer, etc., going up through the hole. So James has done that. He was also just having a look back at the throttle cable, re-lubricating that. We never had a tool. It's actually a tool we've never had in the workshop, is a cable lubricator, and you can get a little tool that kind of clamps around a cable and it seals the nozzle of a spray aerosol into it, so you can literally jet fluid down the cable. So we wanted to do that and get some silicone in there because we thought the throttle cable just felt a little bit sticky. But he's done that. So yeah, that gives you some inkling of the size of the jobs we're down to on it now. It's fairly minor detail stuff. They've also been all over this doing the final spanner check on it. We kind of have a sheet that's ticked off with all the safety critical fasteners, everything's paint marked and photographed, and the photograph's uploaded to a sort of build profile that goes with the car. So that's where we're at with that. Pretty much just waiting on the Viton line fuel hose, and then we'll be into final testing. Stratos, we gassed up the AC. So I think I mentioned last week that Nat had a go at soldering. There was a pinhole in the AC evaporator. He decided to have a go at soldering it, and that did work out. So I was able to gas that up, get that working, which seems fine. Which then allowed a load of other jobs to be done. So the rear bulkhead panel I wanted to leave out until we were definitely sure it was leak free around the compressor. So that's now gone back in. The trim panel that goes over that, the machined shoulder harness bezels that we had back from anodizing a while ago can now go in. And then in tandem with that, the guys have had the clams off for repaint. I've forgotten track of how many times they've been repainted now, but when the owner had it back for a bit of a sort of shakedown session when he was back here, somebody he knows managed to reverse it into the garage door frame and damage one side on the wheel arch. So we repainted the rear clam because of that. The front clam, the dreaded fiberglass had reared its ugly head again, and there was a little sort of cracking sinkage mark on the front, which we decided we wanted to get rid of, so we've repainted the front clam again. Fingers crossed that's going to be the last one. And was there one other paintwork thing on that? No, I think that was it. So the front clam's actually back on. I think Gaz is just in the process of polishing up the rear, and that'll be able to go back on. Anthony's also done a couple of jobs. We needed to do the drain holes in the door, which I think he's done now. The pull straps, the leather pull straps, we noticed it was perilously close to them being able to pop back inside the door, and there wasn't a method in there to stop that happening. It shouldn't happen because you'd always be pulling on them, but if you sort of pull and let it flick back, it would be possible for it to fall back inside the door. So we've just put a basic retaining strap inside to stop that being able to happen. And we swapped out the screws. The door panels are screwed to the door outer, and it was originally just with stainless self-tappers, but some of those were starting to get a little bit iffy on the threads in the fiberglass, so we've swapped all those out for riv nuts and got some nice little stainless wafer head bolts to do a neater job of fitting the door panels in. And I think we are getting extremely close. Essentially the next thing on that is I need to get Alex back on the mapping with it. He was kind of midway through idle mapping when it kind of went for its little shakedown session with the owner. We just need to carry on with that now. We didn't want to do that until we'd got the aircon sorted, because obviously that applies extra load on it, and that will need to be taken into consideration when we're doing the idle mapping. So I can get back on that now, iron out the idle mapping, and I think that will be good to go as well. And the Mustang's had some last little details on the door card clips done. That's awaiting Adam taking it out just to do a little bit of further shakedown testing in it. But yeah, essentially the Morris, the Land Cruiser, the Stratos and the Mustang are kind of literally wrapping up all at the same time. So I guess at some point in the coming weeks we're suddenly going to have a massive void in here. I think on that note I'm going to leave it for this week, and don't forget, if we come around this way, the awesome Octane Legends artwork is available in our shop on our website www.retropower.co.uk, where you can also get mugs, I would say t-shirts, but the weather's going in the direction of possibly hoodies and hoodies? Beanies and hoodies. And of course Roundstone coffee is available there too. So knock yourself out, and I'll see you next week.